this house is so beautiful," said my sister-in-law, Amy, as she looked around every room. "You're really sneaky, aren't you? That's why you wanted to inherit this house," she said, giving me a sharp look. After looking around some more, Amy said something surprising. "You've got good taste. So, this house will be ours too, right? Haven't we already decided about the inheritance?" I tried to understand what she was implying. "There's no reason to argue about it. We've already agreed to swap our current home for this one," she added firmly. It was clear there was no use arguing with her, but the time was coming when she'd see what I was really capable of. "My name is Lily. I'm 28 years old and single. Right now, I'm living with my mom and taking care of my grandmother, who's sick. My older brother, Alex, is married, but he doesn't help much with grandma's care, so I've taken on the responsibility. My mom is here too, but she's getting older and can't do much physically, so I handle most of the caregiving. When we were kids, our mom raised us alone after her divorce, with grandma helping out a lot. Because of everything she's done for us, I can't just leave her now. Since I work from home and don't have a family of my own, it made sense for me to take on this role." Alex's wife, Amy, doesn't seem interested in helping with family matters, so I was the obvious choice. Taking care of grandma is hard, but it's my way of thanking her for all she's done. I enjoy our time together, and it doesn't feel like a burden, but lately, Amy has been stressing me out with her behavior. Alex knows how much grandma helped us growing up, and even though he can't help with caregiving, he visits sometimes to check in. Amy, on the other hand, always finds something to criticize when she comes over. "Are you cleaning properly?" she once asked, looking around the room. "This place is a mess. If you're staying here, at least do your part." Amy has no problem saying what's on her mind, but to me, she's rude. She comes into our house, points out flaws, and makes sarcastic comments. I've let a lot of things go, but one thing she said really upset me. "You're just living here for free," she said with a smirk. "You've got it easy, don't you?" "Yes, I live in grandma's house, but I pay for my own expenses. Alex doesn't support me financially, yet Amy acts like I'm taking advantage of the situation. She doesn't understand how hard it is to work, run a household, and care for someone who's sick." Even when I explained this to her, she just kept provoking me. "You're only doing this because you don't have to pay rent, right? Instead of relying on your parents, now you're relying on your grandma," she said with a smirk. It was exhausting dealing with her, so I started ignoring her comments, but then she'd say, "Oh, you're not responding? Does that mean you agree with me?" Whether I talked back or stayed quiet, Amy found ways to irritate me. She never said anything rude when Alex was around, so he thought she was being nice. When I tried to bring it up with him, he brushed it off. "She wouldn't say that. Are you bullying her instead? She's trying to be friendly, and you're making it hard," Alex said, siding with her. Realizing I couldn't rely on Alex, I decided to avoid Amy as much as possible. One day, grandma's health got worse, and she had to go to the hospital. Alex was too busy with work to visit, so Mom and I handled everything. Mom wasn't in great health either, so I went to the hospital every day to take care of grandma. After about a month, grandma quietly passed away. I knew her condition was serious, but it was still hard to accept. She had been such an important part of my life, and losing her was devastating. And as I was struggling with the loss, I told my mom and brother, David, that grandma had passed away. To my surprise, his wife, Emma, came to see me before he arrived. David was delayed at work, so Emma showed up first. Was she worried about me during such a difficult time? Given her past behavior, I doubted it, but for a moment, I thought she might actually care. Feeling thankful, I said, "Thanks for coming," but her response shocked me. "If you have time to cry, you should focus on getting the funeral and inheritance sorted out," she said bluntly. "David is busy with work, so don't make this harder for us." Her words were cold and completely lacking in sympathy. Instead of offering comfort, she was more interested in speeding up the inheritance process. I shouldn't have been surprised. This was typical of Emma. Even so, it hurt to see how self-centered she was. I appreciated that she came instead of David, but I wasn't about to let her boss me around, especially since she had barely been involved in our family. Still, I kept quiet, not wanting to argue so soon after Grandma's death. When David finally arrived, Emma toned it down for a while, but as soon as he wasn't looking, she went back to her usual sharp comments. Amid my grief, her behavior made me furious, and then she said something I couldn't ignore. "Your grandma lived too long. Did she end up spending all her money?" How much inheritance is even left for us? Emma asked casually before the funeral was over. That was the last straw. Is that all you care about right after someone's death? Stop it, I snapped, my voice louder than I'd intended. She seemed startled. Normally, she'd argue back, but this time she didn't say anything and left. Later, maybe realizing she'd gone too far, she avoided talking to me. Thankfully, the funeral went smoothly. Although I was still grieving, I resolved to move forward and not dwell on Emma's behavior. Back at the house I shared with Grandma, I began sorting through her belongings and handling the inheritance details. A few days later, David and Emma came over. I'll help you sort things out, David said. There was a lot to do, so I was grateful, but, as usual, Emma only cared about the money. She kept bringing up the inheritance while we went through Grandma's things. It was clear Grandma had left behind the house and some savings. As soon as this became clear, Emma quickly said, "We'll take the money. This house isn't really our style, so you can have it." The house was old and not worth much to her, but it was valuable to me because of the memories it held. David seemed unsure, but eventually agreed with her. I decided to keep the house without any argument. As they were leaving, I thanked them for their help. Just before stepping out, Emma smirked and leaned in close. "Too bad all you got was this rundown house. I got the money, so I guess looking after your grandma didn't really pay off for you." She walked away, her words dripping with mockery. Even at the end, her disdain for me was clear. That day, I made a silent promise to myself, no matter what happens, I'll never forgive her. In the months that followed, I stayed in the house with my mom. It was quiet without Grandma, and I missed her. One evening, when my mom was away on a trip, the doorbell rang. Who could it be? I wondered as I went to answer it. When I opened the door, there stood Emma, alone. "Good evening, is something wrong?" I asked, surprised. Before I could say more, she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Wow, why didn't you tell us this house was so amazing?" Emma exclaimed, walking around and examining every corner. "You're sneaky, aren't you? You knew this house was worth keeping, that's why you took it." Her words and tone were just as unpleasant as ever. Emma's words were always critical of me. I think she was surprised by how my grandmother's house had changed, and from that surprise, she focused her anger on me. After Grandma passed away, I took it upon myself to renovate the house. A lot of people were doing home renovations lately, and I thought it would be interesting to try it myself. Even though I was a beginner, I decided to give it a go. Luckily, a friend of mine who worked in construction lived nearby, so he helped me out. The house, which had once been my grandmother's pride, was transformed into a beautiful place. My grandfather had always insisted on using high-quality wood, and I respected his and my grandmother's wishes during the renovation. Now, the house looked luxurious, but still carried the memory of my grandparents. After taking a look around, Emma surprised me by saying, "You've got great taste in renovating this house. We'll take it as our inheritance." I was confused. Wasn't the inheritance already decided? I asked. Emma replied confidently, "We've decided that we'll swap our current house for this one. This house will be my husband's inheritance. You're okay with that, right?" She was pressuring me. As always, there shouldn't be any objections. "Since it's an exchange," she insisted, "we'll start moving right away. You need to pack up and leave." She demanded that I leave, as though she had lost her mind. I tried to remind her about the inheritance agreement, but she ignored everything I said. It was clear that arguing with her wouldn't work, so I decided to retreat for now. "Fine, I'll leave," I told her, and began packing my things. She smiled smugly, relieved that I was cooperating. Ignoring her, I pretended to gather my belongings and went to the garden shed. There, I grabbed the tools I had used to renovate and returned inside, where Emma was waiting. When she saw me holding the tools, she was a bit surprised, but quickly told me to hurry. "You can move those tools later, just clear the room for now," she ordered. "I just need these to collect my personal things," I replied, and then slammed the tools against the wall in the living room. Emma looked shocked, not understanding what I was doing. I ignored her and started tearing down the walls. At that moment, Emma screamed in panic. "What are you doing?" she yelled, trying to stop me. I held her back with the tool and explained, "I paid for all the renovation materials. These are my belongings, so I'm taking them with me." "Stop destroying everything," she shouted, but didn't come closer. I ignored her and kept working on the walls. Just then, my brother David walked in. I had called him as soon as I left Emma to get the tools. "What's going on?" I heard yelling outside. David said, shocked by the scene. He looked around and asked, "What happened here?" Emma immediately told him, "She's destroying the house." Naturally, David was confused and suspicious, but he listened to what I said. "She came in today and told me to leave," I explained calmly. "I didn't know about the renovation, and I can't accept that this house was inherited without my knowledge." Emma argued, "It's unfair, I should be able to live here." When David heard my side, he supported me. "We agreed that my sister would inherit the house, and we'd receive the money, right?" he said. "This house is hers to handle." Emma's plan to get David on her side with a threat of divorce didn't work. David stood firm. "If you can't accept your mistakes, there's no point in continuing this marriage," he said. Emma was speechless, and David continued, "This house is old. My sister used her own money to renovate it and increase its value. There's no issue here." David turned to me. "I'm sorry," he said softly. He then turned to Emma. "You should apologize to her. Maybe you'll understand your mistake if you think about it from her perspective." With tears in her eyes, Emma finally apologized. "I'm sorry for causing all this trouble." I accepted her apology, though I still had plenty to say. David and Emma quietly left, and I was able to keep the house I had worked so hard to restore. Before they left, I spoke to my grandmother's picture in the house. "I got a little carried away and damaged your beloved home, Grandma. I'll fix it up and make it beautiful again. Please forgive me, and I promise I'll take good care of it." It felt as if I received her forgiveness. Her picture seemed to smile faintly. In the end, David divorced Emma. He agreed that what I had said about her behavior was true, and he found it too difficult to keep living with her. "She probably wouldn't change," he said with a smile. As for me, I repaired the house with my own hands. My brother covered the cost of the repairs since they were caused by his ex-wife's actions. A friend in construction joked, "That was a bold move." I'd always planned to repaint the living room anyway. I wasn't entirely happy with it before. Despite everything, I'm happy with how things turned out. From now on, I plan to cherish the memories in this house and make new ones.